Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and I wanted to provide an update on the video we did a few weeks ago on the Heikin Ashi candles. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Now, Heikin Ashi candles are a very interesting way to view the market. And one of the reasons is that rather than assuming that the trend shifts on any given week where the open is lower than the close, what we would prefer to do is measure things in a slightly different way to say, well, if the close cannot be above the midpoint from the prior weekly candle, then we do remain in a downtrend, even if from open to close we saw a higher price. Okay. The reason this is useful is because it has a way of filtering out the noise. And we first showed these Heikin Ashi candles on the channel probably more than a month ago. I think it was somewhere way up here where we first showed them. And the general idea about Heikin Ashi candles is that it helps you identify uptrends and downtrends. Okay. And one of the best ways to view this, they say the trend is your friend, right? It's true. The trend is your friend. It's very much true. And when you're in an uptrend, what you will see large candle bodies with overshadows, right? We're seeing all these overshadows, but no or very few undershadows, meaning no wicks to the downside on the Heikin Ashi candle. Not on the normal candles, but when you're looking at the Heikin Ashi candles, you're not really seeing any wicks to the downside. Okay, so that's what characterizes an uptrend is looking at large candle bodies, overshadows, but no undershadows. But in the same manner, when you're talking about downtrends, they're characterized by large candle bodies and then undershadows, but no overshadows. And when we first spoke about these Heikin Ashi candles a month or two ago, somewhere over here, we were talking about, you're better off just assuming the trend remains down for a while, right? You're just better off. And I don't say that as someone who wants to see, who really wants to see Bitcoin's price go down in the short term. As I mentioned before, I did take advantage of this move over here, and I more or less expected this sell-off to occur, but I did not expect the sell-off to occur from $69,000, and so I don't have any reason to want the price to continue to drop, other than to just say, well, I suppose I could continue buying Bitcoin at cheaper prices, but it would be doing you a disservice to try to assume that we know where the bottom's going to be, and it's often better to just assume that the status quo will remain unchanged until proven otherwise. Okay, there are definitely a lot of people that like to play the game where they constantly call the bottom. But again, if you were trying to call the bottom for the last 10 or 11 weeks, of course, you've been wrong, unless say 33K was the bottom, because I think that is the new level that people are calling for, as it was the most recent low. So the point here is to say, so far, we don't actually see a sustained shift in the momentum here. What do we see? We see large candle bodies, we see undershadows, but no overshadows. And since we don't see any overshadows, what that tells me is that there has not really been a fight by the bulls to actually change the trend. Okay, there just clearly has not been a fight. And so if there has not been a fight, how can we realistically assume that there's going to be an immediate shift to the upside? I don't really feel like we can assume that. And so what I would say is that patience is definitely key during these time periods. And if you're not patient, you can easily get burned out in this market if you keep assuming that the trend has to flip tomorrow. Okay, as I said a couple months ago, let's just assume the trend is down. As kind of as sad as that is to say, let's just assume the trend is down until proven otherwise. And one of the key things to look for the trend to start shifting back the other way is to see an overshadow on the weekly time frame. Okay, so we saw an overshadow here on this weekly time frame. We also saw one here before the trend actually shifted. Note that in the middle of this trend, the bulls put up a fight, but ultimately we kicked the can down the road. And also, I mean, we don't know really where the middle of this trend is going to be, but if, at the current time, we can see in the middle of this trend, the bulls put up a fight. As you can see, a couple of overshadows over here in the current middle of this trend, but then we continue the downtrend for, we've continued it for another month after that at the very least. But the point is to say that until we're looking at a weekly candle, a Heikin Ashi candle, where we're actually looking at an overshadow and a potential shift in the momentum where you're not seeing such a large candle body one after another with these large undershadows but no overshadows, we should not jump to conclusions on the bottom being in. All right. Now, there certainly is a chance that 33K is the bottom. I don't want to make it seem like there's no chance at all. But what I would say is that I think I do think we have quite a bit of work to do before Bitcoin's proving anything other than it's still in a downtrend. And you can see that fairly clearly here on the weekly time frame. If you go to lower time frames, there are certainly phases where the bulls have put up a fight. For instance, they put up a fight over here and right here and right here, and then in this phase as well. But all of these up until this point, every single one of them have been relatively weak, and yet we have not actually seen a higher high. We've just seen lower high after lower high after lower high, which is also similar to what we saw, more or less back in 2019. We just kept seeing lower highs after lower highs after lower highs. This one we finally went up, but it was a double top. And then it was this major shakeout right here that actually shifted the trend. And then we basically just took out all of these prior levels that we were coming out of a downtrend on. So while I do think Bitcoin will eventually reclaim those higher prices that we already are missing, I do think we also need to be very patient and recognize that you can simply look at these Heikin Ashi candles and see that even on some of the lower time frames, like 3 days, the bulls really haven't been showing up. And so I think that proves more or less that the sellers very much remain in control, right? The bears remain in control during this phase, and we just need to be patient and wait for the bulls to show up and look for a potential reversal by looking at hopefully an overshadow on a weekly candle to where we can potentially resume an uptrend. And you can see after this major trend reversal here, we were then greeted with 5 or 6 strong weekly candles in a row where we just went up to the upside. Okay, so I do think we'll eventually get a strong reversal, but the process to getting to that point can of course be very painful, to say the least. And so I just want to remind people that this is a long-term game. Okay, whatever you think is going to happen in the short term, it's more or less irrelevant because no one can really predict what's going to happen here in the market in the short term. But try to have a long-term view on the market. In the long term, a $36,000 Bitcoin, while it might not be the best price to buy if we end up going lower, it is at least almost 50% from the all-time high. So it's certainly not the worst time to buy Bitcoin. The worst time, I guess, would have been at 69K. So you're certainly getting a 45% discount or so at the current time. But I just wanted to provide a few words of encouragement. Just try to be patient. Recognize that we are in a downtrend. Don't get caught up in trying to call the bottom. We will eventually shift this thing around. And what you should be looking for is a potential trend reversal using these Heikin Ashi candles, and you can access those just by going over here, clicking on these candles on TradingView, clicking on Heikin Ashi. You can see how different they look from these candles. If you look at these candles, you could argue, oh, there's a trend reversal going on, or there's a trend reversal, or there's a trend reversal. You switch it over to the Heikin Ashi, it shows a brutally different picture, right? There really hasn't been a fight so far. It just has been a fairly systematic downtrend, and that's one of the reasons why we've just called this a bear market. I don't think it's going to be a year-long bear market like 2018, but it is certainly hard to call a 50% drawdown with 11 red Heikin Ashi candles in a row. It's certainly hard for me to call that a bull market, even though I know some people might say that it's still a macro bull market. I mean, to some degree, you could argue that Bitcoin's been in a bull market for its entire existence, depending on how far out your time frame, like your time frame is for distinguishing where is a bull market and a bear market. You could just say the whole thing, the whole show that we've seen is just one massive bull market. But when you zoom in on monthly time frames, I think it's fairly clear that we are at least in a brief bear market, and we still need a bit of time to turn this thing around. And you should watch these Heikin Ashi candles on the weekly time frame to try to get a better picture of that. And then the last thing I wanted to show was the 2-week Heikin Ashi candles. Because what it shows is during the summer lull, which I actually saw coming, unlike the current drop, we actually had 6 of these in a row, 6 2-week Heikin Ashi candles in a row that were red. Currently, we're in week number 5, okay? And this week will be over in approximately 4 days, and then you'd be looking at another 2-week red candle just for Bitcoin to be in a downtrend for more or less the same period of time that it was back in the summer of 2021. Anyways, hopefully you guys can hang in there. As I say before, hope for the best, plan for the worst. And I do say that with a lot of sincerity. Plan for the worst. Don't assume any price level has to hold. If you're emotionally attached to a certain price level and it drops, then it can make it very difficult. I find that the people in this space, the longest, they become numb to the price movements. The people that lived through 2018, when they watched Bitcoin go from $20K to $3,100, I find that they are the most numb to these things because, if you've watched the price drop 85% once, yeah, who cares, right? At that point, you just sort of take it in stride. And then for those people who lived through 2014, same type of thing. It was basically a very similar version to 2018. And even the people that lived through the 2019 drop, the 70% drop, there were a few people, I think, that experienced the 2019 drop and then going into early 2020 that weren't around for the 2018 drop. And so a lot of these downtrends in the market, a lot of market participants have experienced before, so they're relatively numb to it. And now newer market participants that have joined us in 2021, or I guess even some that may be potentially joining us now in 2022, are getting a wake-up call to the volatility that we can see with Bitcoin, not only to the upside, but also to the downside. So be patient. I will, of course, provide an update on these Heikin Ashi candles. Hopefully when we see a green candle, but I do still imagine we have a little ways to go for that. Thank you guys for tuning in. Remember, we do have the premium list at intothecryptoverse.com. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye.